Hi guys, it's Aoife from Words of Clover and I'm here to do my January wrap up. I would probably suggest getting like a cup of tea or something nice to keep you company while I do this video because I have a feeling it might be a little bit long. I managed to read 15 books in January, which I think might be one of the highest reading ones I've had in a while. I don't know how I read so many, but yeah, especially considering I actually started a new job halfway through the month, so I don't really know, but I hope this like nice reading like speed keeps up for the rest of the year. I'd be very happy with that. But I read some really good books in January. I'm really excited to tell you about them, and I will just get going. The first book I finished in January is actually one that was an audiobook that I carried through from December, which I actually really don't like doing. I like to start the year really fresh, like don't have anything carrying through, but just the way the end of the year went for me, I was I was quite busy. I had a lot of social engagements that I just didn't get the time to quite finish this audiobook. So yeah, I had to finish it at the start of January, but that was Mrs. March by Virginia Feito. This is a book that is very interesting. It's kind of like a literary horror, I guess I would describe it. We are following a woman called Mrs. March. You never really figure out her first name, and it's also the time that this is set in. It's never really made clear like what period of time it's set in. It feels like it's probably maybe around the 50s, 60s, but you're not 100% sure. And we're following a Mrs. March who is the wife of a quite well-known author, and he's just released his new book. She's very happy with how it seems to be perceived for him, how it's been critically reviewed, and then her whole world comes crashing down when she is out and a local shopkeeper says to her that it seems that he has based this new character in his new book off of his wife, off of Mrs. March. And this kind of feels like, from people who don't know much, that this is like might be a nice thing or it's not a big deal, but the character that people are talking about is this kind of like desperate, sad character that is actually a prostitute in the book, and she just can't believe that there would be similarities between her and this character, and her whole world starts to unravel, and we really see how she starts really thinking about her husband, thinking about their relationship, starts seeing things in him that she's never noticed before, and she really starts to wonder if she ever knew him at all, and is he someone completely different to who she thought he was. And we're following her as it really seems like her grip on reality is slipping. She's starting to kind of imagine things, see things, hear things that we're not quite sure are actually there. And then while all of this is going on, this kind of murder mystery presents itself to Mrs. March as well. So she starts looking into this, and this is something that again is very interesting for the whole plot of the story, and we see her grasp onto this, and like this is the only thing that kind of feels real to her, and she's really trying to figure out the mystery of this young girl who has disappeared, and she wants to find out what happened to this girl. So I found the character of Mrs. March very fascinating. She's quite I wouldn't say she's a likeable character, but she's not completely unlikable either. In many ways she is quite, and the more the story goes on, she does become this like lonely, sad, desperate figure, very much similar to the character that she has been like compared to in her husband's new book. And we learn a lot more about her growing up and her relationships with people, her childhood, and we also see her relationships with her husband and her relationships with her son, and we see how people are kind of like acting towards her, and we kind of start kind of getting this kind of picture of who she is. And one of the things I actually found really interesting as in this book as well is how self-absorbed she was for so much of the book, the entirety of the book. She's only ever really thinking about herself and how everything in her world, what it means to her and what it means for her. And even she would be like walking like past people on the street, and all she's ever thinking is what these people are thinking about her, and doesn't ever seem to think that maybe these people aren't even noticing her, maybe they're not thinking about her at all. And we see how this is all just building up and building up, and it just ends up concluding in a very kind of violent and quite tragic way, but it's quite fascinating. It's one of these books that you just kind of have to keep like going with it, that is quite fascinating. You just need to figure out how it all ends up. This one is kind of like a 3.5 out of 5 stars for me. It wasn't like the best book ever, but I did find it very intriguing, and in terms of literary horror, it's probably one of the better ones for me as well. So yeah, I quite enjoyed it. It was an interesting and fun audiobook to listen to, and yeah, 3.5 out of 5 stars. After that, I read my first official book of the year, and it ended up being a 5 out of 5 stars for me, which I'm happy with, and that was Service by Sarah Gilmartin. This is a book that came out, an Irish release that came out in 2023. This one we were following 3 different POVs. We're following Hannah, Daniel and Julia, and we first start off with Hannah, who used to work when she was a teenager, not a teenager, when she was a college student, so like 21. She had a summer where she worked in this very, very high-end restaurant, like a Michelin-starred restaurant, and she was a waitress in this restaurant. And we find out that she's been told by someone that she used to work with that there is a sexual assault case that's going to be happening in the court, focusing on her old boss, the head chef in this restaurant. His name is Daniel, and it's focusing on him, and it kind of brings her back to the summer that she worked in this restaurant, the experiences she had there, particularly with Daniel and other staff members, male, and why she ended up leaving. We also, so that when we're in Hannah's point of view, we're constantly looking back at the past. We're seeing that past experience play out in her memories. Then present day, we are following Daniel and his wife Julia, and we are seeing how the court case is affecting the two of them, how Daniel like staunchly believes that he is innocent, and that the person who has accused him of this sexual assault is a complete liar, and like the reasons why he believes this. And then we're also following Julia, who is in a really difficult situation, obviously, because her husband is up for trial, and this really affects her. It affects the lives of her 2 sons as well, who are teenagers. So obviously it's very hard for them to be seeing the news every day, or seeing the journalists outside their house and know what's going on with their father, and know what he's been accused of. And at the same time, Julia wants to be someone who wants to believe these women as well. So she's in this like really, really difficult situation, and I felt like her point of view was done really, really well, as someone who, you know, wants to hold on to what she has, and her home life and her marriage, and her, for her children, to protect her children as well, but at the same time is looking at her husband and saying, well, could you have done these things? Like, should I believe these women? And she's starting to think about her relationship with him and things that have happened in the past. And this was just done really, really well. I felt like the sense of atmosphere, particularly for, a Michelin starred kitchen, and the tense atmosphere of what it's like to be working under such kind of constraints, like so much pressure on you for everything to be really, really good. We see how Daniel does have like an anger issue problem when it comes like to being in the kitchen. And then we're seeing how the waitresses were treated in this restaurant as well by the mostly male kitchen staff, like the cooks and the sous chefs, and then obviously Daniel as the head chef. But then also there was this kind of like work hard, play harder lifestyle with the kitchen as well, because this was happening during like Celtic Tiger Ireland, where money was like not really an issue. Like there was like, that real kind of circle of party drugs, cocaine, like ecstasy, everything like that. And we see how that is a big thing that they are doing. Like after a tough service, they all get together, have drinks, have a few shots, maybe have a couple of lines, and then go out partying. And like this is the thing, and this is something that Hannah obviously takes part in as well. I think if you like kind of obviously it's a different situation, but if you like, say, shows like The Bear, where you're seeing the inside of a kitchen in that way, you might like some of what's in this as well, because I just felt like it described that atmosphere really, really well that you get probably in a restaurant or in a kitchen. Though I guess if you maybe have worked in those kind of environments yourself, then maybe there might be some of it might hit too close to home as well, in terms of just how hard those jobs are, and especially like the customer facing jobs too, where you're not sometimes treated very well by a customer, and how that can really like affect the rest of your day. I thought Daniel's point of view was really, really good as well, because I feel like sometimes when you are reading books around sexual assault or rape, there's like a very black and white not necessarily like look to it, but in terms of maybe characters, the person who was accused of the assault, sometimes like, you're well, like, he might be repulsive in many ways, or the way he acts and the way he portrays himself comes across as like, you're like, well, yeah, he really feels like someone who would do something like this. Where when we're following Daniel and his point of view, we see him as this very downtrodden man, this man who's on the brink of losing everything he's worked for his entire life, and the lifestyle, the money that's coming in that helps him support his family. He feels like he's afraid that he's going to lose his family, and if he ends up being convicted guilty, he feels confused by the fact that he has been accused in the first place, because he really feels like he shouldn't have been accused. He really feels like he's innocent of these charges. So reading from his point of view, like he does become this like real object of pity sometimes for the reader. And I just really loved how all of that was done. I thought it was done really, really well, and how everything kind of tied up in the end, and these flashes of personality and like real nature coming through now and again with him. And then you're seeing the Daniel like in Hannah's point of view and Julie's point of view, who again are like almost two different men as well. And it's really interesting. It's very intriguing. It's quite like an easy book, like a short book to like fly through. In terms of how it's written, the format of the book, I found it a great one just to fly through, and very, very addictive reading. This was a really good 5 out of 5 stars for me, and yeah, I'm really glad I started out my year with this one. Next, I read Minor Detail by Adania. Shibli. This is a book that has had quite a lot of attention over the past few months, especially with everything that's been going on in Palestine. And this is set in Palestine. We are following two different point of views. We are following a point of view that's happening in 1949, and we are following a group of Israeli soldiers in this part of Palestine, and we see them come across this woman and kind of take her in as a prisoner, and we see how they treat this woman and this kind of callous mistreatment of this woman. And then we're also following another character years later who finds out about this moment in history, and there's just something about it that really strikes like something in her, and she just finds that she really needs to learn more about it and learn more about this woman and what happened to her. And she just feels a connection to the story, and we see her take a journey across Palestine, find out more. And I thought this was it was very heart-wrenching. The realities of what it's like to be a person living in Palestine with all the restrictions, and the way just to get from A to B, you need all sorts of like different passes, and you have to have certain stamps to be able to let you do certain things, to get a credit card, to rent a car, to go through this gate, to get here. And it was like such an eye-opening reading experience for me in terms of seeing what a daily life is like. Well, not at the moment, obviously, because it's even more horrific than it is in this book. But what daily life is like for people who are living in Palestine, and all the restrictions they face, and they really are in just an open air prison, like the biggest open air prison in the world. This very much, I feel like, hammers down that fact. That's what it is. And this book is a real like it has a very kind of shocking conclusion that really leaves you reeling and really leaves you thinking about everything that you've read. And yeah, I found it very impactful. I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars. I'm going to see how it kind of rests with me if it does come up to 5 stars now that I'm even like talking about it again. I'm remembering all those moments and that it did have an impact on me, so it could even go up higher, 4.5 out of 5 stars. It is very good. It's a short book, but it's a very impactful book, and if you're thinking about reading it, I would highly recommend it. And then for a non-fiction book this month, I read Are You There, God? It's Me, Ellen by Coyne. This is an Irish book. Coyne is an Irish journalist, and in this she is talking about her own journey in terms of getting back into religion, or kind of coming to terms with the fact that she still believes herself to be a Catholic, but then also kind of trying to figure out that if you can be a modern Catholic, a modern woman in Ireland who obviously believes in abortion care for women, you believe in like gay rights, that like all these like big moments we've had in Ireland in the past years. And also as a journalist, she's also covered a lot in terms of the mother and baby homes, the tomb babies, the bodies of babies that have been discovered in the grounds of these mother and baby homes, the mistreatment that has really like come to light in the past like 20-30 years. She is really kind of looking at all of that and being like, can you morally be a Catholic anymore because of everything that the Catholic Church has done? Like, can she bring herself to say, yes, I am a Catholic and I follow the Church's teachings, when in reality, particularly in Ireland, the Church has done really, really horrendous crimes, particularly to women and children in Ireland. And I found it a really interesting look at what it's like to be a modern Catholic in Ireland. I myself wouldn't consider myself a Catholic, but I grew up in a Catholic home. My dad would be quite religious. I went to a national school. I made I was christened. I made my communion. I did my confirmation. I had different jobs in like Sunday mass every week. So I grew up very much with religion there. Though I will say, like, my parents, like my father wouldn't be there, like he wouldn't be like that I have to be Catholic. He kind of accepts the fact that myself and my brother, we don't feel the same way as he does about the church anymore. But it was really when I was a teenager and I was learning so much about the atrocities that the church has committed in Ireland that I really broke away from it, and I was like, this isn't something that I believe in anymore. This is not something I can agree with, and particularly around women as well, and the rights of a woman to her own body is something I feel very, very strongly about, and I've never liked how the Catholic Church has acted around this in Ireland. And I found Ellen's journey with this, the conversation she had, not just with people connected to the Catholic Church, and she tried her best to also like talk to high up people within the institution of the Catholic Church in Ireland, and some of those were, she like says that she reached out several times and she never got anything back, which I found very interesting and telling in many ways. And she also talks to people who are associated with other churches in Ireland, the Church of Ireland. So yeah, I just found this really interesting. While there are some things that Ellen believes in that I wouldn't believe in, I did really enjoy her journey as someone who's the same age as me and going through kind of the same life experiences, and her journey back. I found it very interesting to follow. And the fact she is a journalist, I think this was written very well, very concisely, and also, even though this is obviously aimed at an Irish reader, I think she described a lot of things really, really well in terms of, if you aren't from Ireland, she describes moments, like cultural Irish moments and newsworthy moments, that you could figure out, like you could understand what is going on and what she's referencing, what she is referencing. So yeah, this was like 4 out of 5 stars for me, and I enjoyed it, and I'm glad I read it. Then I did a reread, and that was Eldest by Christopher Paolini. You might remember in November I read Aragon, which is the first book in the series. This is the second one. This again, we just follow Aragon and his dragon Saphira as they continue their training. This one, they really go deep into training with the elves, the elvish population in this book, as they learn more about magic, what it means to be a rider and a dragon, and we're kind of building up again to this really big battle at the end of this, where there's going to be some really shocking moments. And obviously I knew all of that was coming because I have read this series before, so I was very excited for this battle, but I still enjoyed myself immensely, like reading this, rereading all the bits around the elves and the way the magic worked and the training. I love a good training montage in a movie. I love a training like section in a book. It's just something I really, really enjoy. I will say this book is quite slow paced, and I do think it could have been a little bit faster at times. So this one is a much more slower paced. Like the first one is slowish. This one is even slower because, for a lot of it he's either traveling to the elves, and then there's the major point, like there's a huge point of it where he's basically just training. A lot of it is kind of hitting a brick wall many times with his training before he breaks through it and like figures things out. And yeah, the one thing, I think I said this in November when I read Aragon, the one thing I've always had issues with in this book is the relationships, and particularly and the female characters. I don't know, there's relationships in this book that I just do not like, and there's a relationship that Aragon, he basically fancies this character who's much older than him because she is literally an immortal being and he is a human. So he basically, like, he's like a fetus to her. She's so much older than him, and he has this massive crush on her, and he knows well and good that she does not fancy him back. It's very much implied that she has had a romantic relationship before that ended very tragically, that she obviously isn't over, and he continuously says things to her that makes her uncomfortable and makes things awkward between them and makes her feel upset. And then is she supposed to feel bad that she doesn't feel the same way as him, when she has literally never ever given him like a signal that she likes him romantically. And it's just really frustrating because it happens 2 or 3 times in this book, and it's like, get the hint, she does not fancy you, just stop it. It's so annoying. Yeah, and that kind of continues for the series, to be honest, because it's just one of these really annoying things with the series, and it's one I didn't like when I first read it and I still don't like it now. So yeah, but this was good. It was a 4 out of 5 stars. It wasn't a 5 out of 5 because I do think that, and then the pacing was just that bit slow, but I still very much enjoyed it. Then I read a book called Sugar Baby by Celine Saintclare, and this is a really interesting book and one that I would actually encourage a lot of people to read. This In this book, we are following Agnes Green, who's 21 years old. She is a cleaner with her mom is also a cleaner. They work for the same company, and she is cleaning this woman's house, and she gets talking to this woman's daughter. And the daughter kind of like takes Agnes, is like around the same age as Agnes, maybe a little bit older. And she kind of takes Agnes under her wing and ends up introducing Agnes to this world of being a sugar baby. So it kind of is, you can pretty much think is like finding yourself a sugar daddy, having 1, 2, 3, as many as you can handle, I guess, and keeping these men company, having sex with these men if that's what you want. It's not like you don't have to have sex with these men if you don't want to. Some of them just like a company, like a girl to spoil, buy nice things, go for dinner with, and that's it. And Agnes falls into this life very easily and kind of finds a new sense of freedom in many ways with this life, as she has grown up with her mother, who is very, very religious and has always kind of dumped a lot of like religious trauma on Agnes, and Agnes has always felt that the sexuality that she feels, she feels like she's a very sexual being. She really enjoys sex and she wants sex, and she's always kind of felt that there's something wrong with her because of that, and that she must be going to hell and all of these things because of how her mother makes her feel around like just being a sensual woman and like showing a bit of skin or acting in a certain way. She's been very, very much controlled by her mother, and we see her now breaking free and becoming a sugar baby, and the experiences she has as a sugar baby with different men, and how she really finds her own as a sexual, sensual being, as a woman who is so beautiful that she can like bring men to their knees in many ways, and she finds ways that she can control men in her life as well. And we see how this all plays out for Agnes. Now obviously being a sugar baby is like not a recommended thing. It is like can be very dangerous, and we see her in situations that like aren't always great for her. We see her, you know, do things and like act in certain ways that maybe she wouldn't if she wasn't doing this. And I just thought like the way it like the whole thing played out was just done really, really well. I thought Agnes as a character was fantastic. The character growth we see in her, the sense of belief that she feels for herself as she kind of just breaks away from her family home and makes her own money and has choices for the first time in a long time because of that like slight financial freedom. But then again, we also see how things are different for her than the other girls who she knows now, who she's living with, who are also sugar babies. They all come from very wealthy families, and some of them are white, some of them aren't, but she is a black working class woman, and she doesn't have the same type of rich family that she can just fall back on if she suddenly stops doing the sugar babying the way the other girls can. And we see how this affects her as well in terms of the type of sugar baby things that she does, and how like it becomes like a real, not obsession with her, but like it's something that she really needs to like get a handle on. But then I just thought this was really good. It's kind of, I don't want to say too much because I don't want to spoil things either, but at the end of it, she does turn around to her friend, and her friend is like, well, was it fun? And she was like, yeah, it was a lot of fucking fun. So like, even though like it obviously isn't like a long-term plan, she kind of like falls into it. She enjoys it for what it is. She like enjoys the sex that she has. She enjoys the nice things that are being bought for her and the freedom that financial like gain gives her as well. And she just has fun, and at the end of it she comes out with some life experiences and kind of a better direction in where she wants to go in life. And I really enjoyed this. I thought it was just really interesting, really fun, really exciting, really different in many ways as well to other books I've read. So Celine Saintclare is an author that I will be watching, and I will definitely be reading the next book that she comes out with, as I think this was her debut. So I really enjoyed this one, and I gave it a really strong 4 out of 5 stars. Then I read a book that has been on my TBR for so long, since 2022, because I got this because it was longlisted for the Women's Prize for Fiction. This is The Bread the Devil Needs by Lisa Allen-Agostini. This is set in Trinidad. We are following a character called Ali, who's she's just about to turn 40. And we know straight away as we were following her that she is in a abusive relationship. She is living with her boyfriend or her common law husband for a few years. They are living in a house that is his, that was previously owned by his parents, and she works in a small clothing store. And in this clothing store, she is the manager. She kind of like looks after everyone. And but we see that she, when she gets home, she has to be like, she's basically on eggshells. She's really not treated well at all by her partner. Like anything she says or does, like she can get a smack from him. And yeah, she's always having to cover up bruises and like sore points in her body because of how he treats her. And at the start of this book, a woman ends up getting shot outside of the shop that Ali works in, and she's shot by like her partner, and it's like kind of brought down to it being a domestic incident. And Ali really sees for about, like, it kind of shocks her obviously seeing this. It's obviously shocking when witnessing something like that, but she also can't help but see herself in the victim and realizing that that could be her at some point in her life if she doesn't get away from Leo, who is her boyfriend. And yeah, so we follow Ali as she's kind of going through all of these emotions. We start like, she starts reconnecting with some people from her past, from her childhood, and we learn more about her childhood, how she grew up, the fact that she has pretty much never known anything but abuse her entire life. We find out about how her mother treated her, how other family members treated her, and there are some really, really tough topics in this. There is obviously domestic abuse, there's child abuse, there's child sexual abuse. There's a lot of things that poor Ali like really had to go through, and we start realizing like why she is the way she is. Like, she's so independent in so many ways, and she is someone who, is a character that is just, you are just rooting for her so much, and like things just keep knocking her back down and she just keeps getting herself back up. And you kind of can see how she's allowed herself to move from an abusive relationship to abusive relationship to abusive relationship, and because it's literally all she's ever known. Like, she's known no different her entire life, and we see all of that and how it affects her. And I just thought this was such a moving book. I really, really enjoyed it. It is kind of a weird word considering the subject matter, but I was just hooked onto it in terms of wanting to find out how it ended. Seeing, does she get like any release? Does she get some sort of happy ever, like not happy ever after, but does she end up in a happier place than she started? And yeah, I just like, even just like the Trinidadian culture, there are some interesting discussions around colorism in this, as well as Ali is a white woman, and we see how she is treated differently sometimes than her black counterparts. And it's just like, she kind of talks about that herself, how she notices it as well. I just thought all of that was really interesting, alongside just the discussion, the general discussion of a woman living in a abusive relationship as well. But yeah, really, really enjoyed this, and I'm really glad I finally read it. And again, another really, really strong 4 out of 5 stars. After that, I listened to an audiobook, and that was The Makings of Another Motion Masterpiece by Tom Hanks. This is a really fun audiobook to listen to if anyone is looking for an audiobook to listen to, because obviously money has been put behind it because of the author, and he narrates most of it, but you do get kind of like guest audios for different characters like Rita Wilson, and a few other kind of like bigger names that you would recognize, and you kind of recognize voices as well for this. So this is basically, you're seeing the start to the end of a movie idea. So we are seeing how we're following like this kind of director, screenwriter, as he comes across this idea of a movie he wants to make, and then we kind of go back to the initial idea of this character that was a comic book, and we see the childhood of this comic book creator and how he got the inspiration to make this comic book that ends up coming into this screenwriter's life, that he ends up saying, well, I want to make a movie about this, and this is what the movie he's going to write and direct. And we see it kind of from the very, very start to kind of post-production time, and we're seeing like what it really takes to make a movie, and all the different people it takes like to make a movie, and how a movie isn't just like the big name stars that are on like the title screen, but it's actually every single person, from the like producers to the cameramen to the showrunners. Everyone working on particular days ends up making a movie great. It's not just one person. And I really love that idea. I think if you're into filmmaking, if you are really interested in how movies are made, this one would be a really good one for you to read, because I think Tom Hanks, obviously, like, he knows what he's talking about when it comes to making a movie. So I think the way he brings it all across, the way he brings the movie making business to life in this book is really good. What I will say about this book is that it's quite slow paced. It's like, I feel like it really doesn't get going in terms of like the movie being made until 50% through. He really, really likes to give you like every single bit of background on every single character, and that does get a little bit tedious at times. Like, he's pretty much short of like telling you what times of the day they go to the toilet. Like, he really wants you to know everything about the characters you're following. And I understand that. I understand why you want like people to know about the characters, but yeah, there could have probably been some extra editing here just to slim down some of these bits. There really was like a lot of words used when a few words could have done at some points. But I still like did really enjoy this. This was like the first 50% of this book was like a 3 out of 5 stars for me, because I was like, is this ever really going to get going? But then once it got to the moving making parts of it, I really, really enjoyed it. And it was one of these ones that, like, by the time the book was finished, I was like, I'm kind of sad that this movie isn't a real movie, because I would actually love to watch it now that I've seen it all, like, kind of come to life as it was being made. I would actually love to be able to watch the final product. I gave this 4 out of 5 stars. Then I read a book that was on a lot of people's favourites books of the year for 2023, and that was Yellowface by R.F Kuang. I don't think I have to say too much about this book, because I feel like so many people have read it. In this, we are following a character called June Hayward, who's an author, and on the chapter that we are meeting her, she is basically watching one of her only friends in the world choke on a pancake and die. And this friend, her name is Athena Liu, she is an author as well, but she has found a lot more success than June has. In June's writing endeavours have kind of failed. Her first book flopped, didn't really make a lot of money, and she's having a lot of like writer's block with her next book. She doesn't really know what to do, and if being a writer is something that she will ever do. And then when Athena dies, June makes a decision to basically rob Athena's manuscript for the book that she has just finished, and because of the way Athena works, no one else has read this manuscript yet. So June takes it, reads it, realizes it's an amazing story, and decides to publish it under her own name. And there's like obviously a lot of problems with this, but one of the problems is that this book is focusing on a period of Chinese history during World War II, and June is obviously not a Chinese writer or of Chinese descent in any way. She's a very white woman, now kind of, yeah, like pretending she wrote a book about Chinese history. And we see how the publishing world works in terms of a book that comes out that's obviously going to do really well, publishers obviously bidding for a book, and then the book coming out, the buzz of a book, reviewers, critique. You see how June handles all of that. And yeah, as someone who is like a very small part of like the book world, but I've never worked in publishing, so I don't know a lot of how like a lot of like areas of publishing works. I found this really, really interesting. I really found like some of the ideas around like book reviewing as well, and some like there's so much in this book that like I recognize as someone who is like part of the online book world, and there were so many bits in this that I recognized and I had fun with as well. So I really enjoyed this. It was very easy to read. I kind of would have liked like the way it ended. I understand the way it ended that way, and there was many horrifying ways the way it ended. There was something in me that would have liked a slightly more like bloodier, violent ending or something. So, but I gave this a 4 to 5 stars. I enjoyed it, and yeah, I really do have to read R.F Kuang's fantasy books, because I really liked her writing in this one. Then I read a book that's been on my NetGalley backlist, is one that I just needed to read, and that's called Ensnared by Rita Stradling. This is like a slightly sci-fi dystopian-esque Beauty and the Beast retelling. We are following a character called Elaine, whose father basically builds like these AI robots, and because of something that he was supposed to build but then he didn't, Elaine ends up pretending to be this AI robot and goes into this like kind of tower that's owned by a billionaire, and because he like doesn't go outside, and she basically has to pretend to be this robot that he has commissioned from her father, basically to kind of keep him company, because he is living on his own with like literally like no humans around him, and he just kind of wanted like someone like somewhat human, realistic to talk to, and the two of them like obviously start to get to know each other better, and you can kind of guess what happens. They kind of fall in love. This was fine. I liked the start of it, and then by the end of it, it just like very much fell apart. I thought the romance like was sweet and cute, but kind of happened very kind of quickly at some point, and I'm like, we're kind of forgetting the fact that he thinks he's having sex with the robot. Cool. So like, yeah, there was that, and then there was so much of the world building that was just like really bad. You get like the tower, but then you don't understand like anything else about the world. And it's like, if this is a world that has like these really high tech AI robots and has all these other automatons, why is she taking like a creaky bus up to the tower? Like, surely this is a world that would have something a little bit more high tech than that. That like just didn't really make sense. And yeah, and then the end of it, I was just like, it just like wouldn't end. You know, when like you're 60% through a book and you're like, I feel like this could conclude right now, and there's like another 40% left, and you're like, what else is there to say about this story? Like, there's nothing left to do. So it was kind of one of those books. So I gave it like a 2 out of 5 stars in the end, I think, or 2.5 out of 5 stars, because I did enjoy the start of it, but yeah, it just kind of slowly went like downhill for me. And then I did a reread on audiobook, and that was My Name is Lucy Barton by Elizabeth Strout. And Elizabeth Strout is definitely one of my favorite authors. I just love how she writes characters. I love how she writes what it means to be human and all the different facets of humanity, from like the good and the bad and all those in between moments. In this, we are following a character called Lucy who is in hospital, and she basically just has had some complications after surgery, and she's had to stay in hospital for a while. And she wakes up one day and her mother is at her bedside, and her mother stays for 3 days at her bedside while Lucy's recovering. And this is a really big deal for Lucy, because she actually hasn't seen her mother in like a good number of years, because her mother and her father objected to her husband, who she married and has had children with since then. Them are now talking and kind of like reconnecting in many ways, and Lucy is thinking a lot about her childhood and a lot of people that she knew in her as she grew up, and a lot of like pivotal moments in her life that she's thinking about. And as like they're talking more, and Lucy's talking more about how she grew up, we kind of start realizing that there's like a lot of things in her childhood that don't seem to be really great, yet at the same time she is portraying so much love and affection for her mother, while we are slowly understanding that her mother doesn't seem to have been a very good mother in the grand scheme of things. And it's just really interesting seeing how this all plays out. And yeah, I really enjoyed this. It's just like a very like nice, it's a really good on audiobook. It's quite short. Kimberly Farr does the audiobook. I feel like she did Olive Kitteridge as well, which is Elizabeth Strout's other series that I really love. I really love Olive Kitteridge. I'd be a bigger fan of Olive Kitteridge than I would of Lucy Barton, but they're both very, very similar. And after My Name is Lucy Barton, I also read the next book in the series, which is Anything is Possible, which, not like Lucy, because with My Name is Lucy Barton, we're just following Lucy and her story. Anything is Possible is a little bit similar to Olive Kitteridge in that it's a bunch of short stories of people who are all connected in some way to Lucy and to the town that she grew up in. And we see her mentioned a lot by different characters that we are following. And some of the characters that we are following are characters she has mentioned in that first book, My Name is Lucy Barton. And we are seeing how that all plays out. Both of these were like 3.5 out of 5 stars for me. I just think I lost, like, I was listening to them on audiobook. I think there were times where I just drifted a little bit, that I wasn't completely clued in or completely gripped to the stories, but I still did really enjoy it. I do love Elizabeth Strout's writing, and as I said, I just love how she writes different characters, the different facets of what it means to be human, and the terrible things people do, but also the lovely things that people do. And yeah, what builds us up as people, like the moments that like make us who we are. I feel like she writes really well, and particularly the last story in Anything is Possible I thought was really beautiful. We're following Lucy's cousin Abel, and we see him as an older man with his family and his grandchildren, and there's just like this storyline of him, and I just really loved it. And that was the book that, like, that was the story that had the moment that like he says anything is possible, which obviously is the title, and just the way that all came together, I just really, really loved, and it's really stuck with me. So yeah, 3.5 out of 5 stars for the both of these Lucy Barton books, and yeah, I just love Elizabeth Strout. I think she just writes so beautifully, and I would write anything, or I would read anything that she writes. Then I read a children's book that was The Forgotten Horse by Elaine Heaney. This is a book we're following this is aimed for 8 to like 11-year-old, or 8 to 12-year-olds, or 8 to 10-year-olds. I'm a 32-year-old woman, and I read it and I very much enjoyed it. This is a book we're following a little girl called Claudia who lives with her mum and dad and her brother. Her mum and dad run a B&B, and we kind of learn at the start that they're struggling a little bit financially. And Claudia wakes up one morning and is so excited because in the fields next to her house there is now a pony, and she goes out and starts making friends with this pony. She realizes he's not being looked after very well, so she starts looking after him and obviously bonds with him. And then to her horror, he ends up being sold to the local riding school up the road that doesn't have a very good reputation, and she is kind of has to come up with a plan on how she's going to save Ozzy and how she can buy him and make him her own pony. And we kind of just follow her as she does this. She kind of like has this plan of like getting a little part-time or after school job, and she can save up and buy this pony. And I just was like, if I was like a 10-year-old girl reading this, like I would have absolutely loved it. Claudia is basically like living like the life I would have wanted in terms of being able to like have a little job and like saving up to buy a pony. It's just very, very cute. There were moments in this where I thought her parents were a little bit like useless in many ways. Like it says that they're like struggling slightly financially, but they're not like in dire straits. It's just that like the B&B could be doing better, or it's like important for them for the B&B to have really good, like customer flow during the year, but they're not like like not being able to put on the heat or they have food on the table. Like it's not like that. But there were times when Claudia was doing like things, like she goes to like a fair at some like a market at some point to literally buy a horse, and neither of her parents come with her. And I was like would you not like take a day off and like go to the market with your daughter while she buys like a bloody horse? Like it's just like it was stuff like that. I was a little bit like, okay, that's a bit much. Like, and they were fine with her buying the horse. They were like, okay, like we will let you do this, but you have to go on your own. Like it just makes no sense to me. But yeah, I really enjoyed this. I gave this like a 4.5 out of 5 stars because I will say as well, I was reading this at a particular time of the month, and there were things in it that like made me emotional that probably wouldn't make me emotional at other times of the month, if you understand what I'm saying. So I think it was just like a good time for me to read this, and I gave it a very strong rating, where maybe if I'd read it at a different time it would have been slightly lower, but we'll still go with it. Like it's 4.5 out of 5 stars. And yeah, I will probably pick up the next books on that. This is just one I picked up on Kindle Unlimited at the time, and I'm very tempted to pay more than 99p, which is what I normally pay for a Kindle book, to read the other books. Then I read a book that I've heard so many good things about, and that was Elena Knows by Claudia Piñeiro. This is translated from Spanish. It is set in Argentina, and we are following a woman called Elena who's travelling across the city to meet with a woman who she believes will be able to help her figure out what happened to her daughter who recently died. And Elena feels like there's something not right with how her daughter has died. She doesn't believe her daughter would die in this way, and she thinks that someone has basically murdered her daughter, and she is convinced of this, and she's basically on a journey to try and find a woman who might be able to help her. And we are learning about Elena herself as she makes this journey. We learn that she has Parkinson's disease, and it's basically very hard for her to get anywhere. She has to take pills to be able to even like move her body, and everything is a real struggle for her. And we really see what it's like to be in a body that is debilitated by a progressive illness, and the struggles of what just like ordinary everyday life is to so many other people, like just taking the train, how hard this is for Elena because of what she has to live with now. And we also get flashbacks to Elena's past, and her relationship with her daughter Rita, and different like times they have had, different experiences they've had together, and many reasons why she believes that her daughter wouldn't have died in the way that she died, which is by suicide. So yeah, we are just following all of this. I thought this was really moving, quite emotional at times, and just really, really thought-provoking in so many different ways. The author focuses on like elements of Elena's story, like both like, you know, what it's like to be in a body that is crippled by illness, the pride that Elena feels in many scenarios, but also the moments that she has to ask for help. What it would have been like for Rita to have been caring for her mother and seeing her mother like this. We also see many moments between Elena and Rita that aren't particularly nice. Like mother and daughters like argue, they fight, like it's just what happens. But we also see moments where Rita really like speaks to her mother in really horrible ways. Like Rita isn't portrayed to be this like perfect angel of a person. There are many times where she speaks to Elena in like not a very nice way. But then there's also times that we see how Elena was probably not the nicest mother in the world either. We see Elena's ideas and her feelings around being a mother, being a parent, and what that was like for her. And there's also some running themes around like women's rights, feminism, and abortion as well. And we see how this all kind of comes together in like kind of a one big kind of circle by the end of it. And there's a kind of a afterword in this that I really, really liked. And it's just, I think it was it's just something the publishers put in. And it's just talking about Claudia Piñeiro's the type of writing that she has done, the type of books that she's written that have won awards, and the other books that have been translated into English, which are kind of her crime thrillery type of books, but how a lot of her books do focus on feminism, women's rights, abortion, and how she brings these messages across. And I really liked that afterward. I thought it really makes you think a lot about what has just occurred in this book. And I would, if you are reading this book, I would recommend reading that afterward, because I thought it was very enlightening in many ways. And I definitely want to pick up Claudia Piñeiro's other books that I've translated into English, because I really, really liked her writing in this. And yeah, as I said, very thought-provoking in many different ways. I gave this a 4 out of 5 stars. Again, I think this is one that I'm going to have to see how it sits with me. Like if I keep thinking about it, it could be bumped up to a 5 stars by the end of the year. I'm not sure. I have already recommended it to one friend who has already bought it, and I'm really looking forward to seeing what she thinks about it and the discussions we might be able to have about it. But yeah, I thought this was a brilliant book, really well translated as well, and I'm definitely going to be reading more from this author. Okay, and the last book that I finished reading, it technically finished as the 1st of February, but I read most of it in January, so I'm putting it in. That is The Judas Blossom by Stephen Aryan. This is a historical fantasy book that is set in 1260s Persia, and we are following Hulagu Khan as he takes over Persia, as he goes in with his forces and destroys the local warriors and takes control, and is basically bringing Persia into the Mongol Empire, and is looking at other places in the Middle East to bring into the Mongol Empire. We are following a few different characters. We are following the point of view of Hulagu Khan, as we see his plans, his relationships with his family, and his anger issues as he does all of this. We're also following Kaivan, who is a Persian general who's obviously been brought down by the Mongols and now hates Hulagu Khan, wants to take him down, wants to kill him, wants to destroy the Mongol Empire, but realizes that just killing Hulagu Khan isn't going to bring everything down. He has to rethink about how he will do it, and he ends up saying, well, if I get onto into the inner circle of the Khans and can figure out how to bring it down from the inside, that might be best. And that we see him as he starts doing that in this book. We are following a female character called Coco Chin, who was part of another kind of Mongol tribe who was killed by the Khans, by Kublai Khan, and who was Hulagu's brother. And she becomes the new wife of Hulagu Khan, and we see her struggle with what it means for her to be the wife of this warrior, what she should do now. And we also see her as she ends up finding out about this kind of secret female assassin group, and is kind of initiated into that, and kind of learns how to become basically a female assassin and what she's going to do with that. And then the last character we're following is Temujin, which is one of Hulagu's youngest sons, and we see that he is very much not a warrior. He's more like the bookish sort. He really doesn't like fighting, doesn't like death, doesn't like to be like killing people for no reason. And he's really much looked down upon by his father and doesn't meet any of his father's expectations for him, which is obviously hard for him. And we know that he is always thought of as a little bit odd by everyone, and we start seeing that he could have actually some kind of magical ability that he doesn't really know about yet, and he starts exploring that in this book. So there's a lot going on in this. I thought this was quite simply written for like what it's covering. This is an interesting read because I enjoyed this. I thought, like, I flew through it. I have this like lovely kind of like floppy paperback, which was actually given to me by the publishers, Angry Robot, so thank you to them. So I enjoyed like my reading experience of this, but in terms of the actual book, I thought it was slightly simple at times, where I personally would have liked a lot more detail in many ways. I thought it was quite fast paced when I personally would have preferred for it to be slower. I would have liked this. This is like 400 pages. I think I would have liked this to have been like 500, 600 pages maybe, and like completely slowed down, where we're really getting all the details of the cities, the wars, like the palaces, the way of life in every single city and like place that we're traveling through. I think I would have liked everything, because I think that's how, when I'm thinking about historical fantasy, that's the type of books I'm normally reading, something that is quite slowed down and heavily detailed. So reading this one wasn't what I'm used to, and I was kind of surprised that it was more simple in many ways. I actually personally would not have, like, if I could make changes to this book, I would take Hula Goose Khan's point of view completely out of it, because I don't think we actually needed his point of view, because we were seeing him from the others' point of views. I would actually have loved this to have only followed Kai Von and Coco Chin, who are the two people who are kind of like trying to bring the Mongol Empire down from the inside in two different ways. And I would have loved for it to just to follow them, and then we would have seen Hulagu through like their experiences with him, which obviously would have been as a husband and then as a war leader. And I thought that would have been like really interesting to see. And I actually would take out Temujin's like point of view altogether, because I actually felt like, for me, I actually thought that the magical element of it, his point of view, took away from the story of the Khan's expansion into the Middle East. Yeah, that's what I would have done. So I gave this a 3 out of 5 stars, because I couldn't help but feel like there were so many ways it could have been better. And while I did enjoy it, I just didn't love it, and there were many ways in which it disappointed me, unfortunately. So yeah, those are just like my feelings, but I have a feeling that I'm in the minority. I think a lot of people really, really love this. And I think for me, it's kind of like, it's not a book problem, it's probably a me problem. So yeah, this was a 3 out of 5 stars. This is everything I read in January. Please let me know what you guys have read. If you've read any of these books, I would love to know. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you guys again next time. Bye.